So it started like most of my home improvement projects. It kind of sat in the back of my head and grew and grew and grew, and then suddenly sprang forth, full formed, out of my brow. I looked at my husband and I said, "We need to rent a bobcat." And what, pray tell, will we be doing with a small wildcat with a stubby tail? He asked, with just that one eyebrow raised. I can't do it, but he can. And I had to stop and explain that the bobcat in question that I wanted to rent was in fact one of those little yellow construction vehicles you see. Those little guys with they're like a mini bulldozer. That's what I wanted to rent. Because see, I've been thinking about my front walkway for a long time. It was ugly. I mean, it was ugly. When we bought the house, I was like, oh, that's got to go. But it took a long time. But I finally said, this is the year. So this walkway was covered in asphalt. It had been cracked. At one point, half of it had been ripped out. It was all torn up, and it had the nerve to go straight up from the sidewalk straight to my front porch without any kind of lollygagging about it. So I wanted a much more elegant entry. I wanted people to enjoy as they walked into my home. I wanted a curved slate walkway. So, but the first thing you have to do to get a nice curved slate walkway is to rip out the old stuff. So this being Maine, it's really easy to find somebody that'll come down and deliver a bobcat, give you a few minutes of lessons, and say, see you at the end of the weekend. And that's what we did. So the guy shows up, and he's one of these guys that thinks that the person who's going to be driving his expensive piece of construction machinery is going to be a man. And see, the thing is, I always wanted to drive a bobcat. I mean, I was dying to drive a bobcat. In fact, driving a bobcat is on my bucket list. But I don't want to scare them off because they finally have a bobcat in my front yard. So I sit, and as quietly as Audrey can, watched as Rudy, my husband, got to learn all about how do you lift the shovel with it, because you have to use feet and all kinds of different things you use to drive this thing. And I'm like, oh, come on, guy, take off. As soon as he's gone, I'm getting the bobcat. Oh, my husband explains to me very rationally that, in fact, the person who got the training from the very knowledgeable elderly gentleman who brought us their very expensive construction material really ought to be driving the vehicle. Well, how do you argue with that, right? So I said, fine, of course, absolutely, well reasoned, dear. And I lay in wait for him to make one fatal mistake. Oh my God, he took to it like a duck to water. He did everything perfectly. It was so annoying. I mean, he would gently scoop that scoop up, get a good grip on things, flip it up, carry it off, drive the bucket. He had everything down. So he was tooling along, and the way he figured out was, because it was all half torn up, as I mentioned before, so he started smack in the middle of the walkway, and he's working his way up to that front step. This time working, I didn't mind that straight path this time. We're straight pathing our way to a new view of life. So he gets to what should be the last piece before we stop at the front steps. And he's doing his nugs and his beautiful lifting up of the bucket. And not only does the stone lift up, the front steps lift up, and the front porch starts to make a strange creaking sound. And I got to use a phrase I've been waiting to use all night. Step away from the bobcat. It's mine. So I climbed into that bobcat, and I ever so gently lowered that thing down. And after a careful examination, we figured out that what had happened was when they built the walkway, They built the walkway first, and then in 1915 they put in the stairs. So we decided that was a lovely piece of architecture, and that we were going to leave it there. So then, now I've got the Bobcat, and he's not getting back. So then I turned around and started digging my way back to the front of to the street. So I'm tearing along, and I'm like, hey, I'm doing pretty good. This is pretty fun. I'm having a good time. I start tearing stuff up, and tearing it up, and I'm getting really excited, and I'm like, this is great. I'm just ripping stuff up. Goodbye, ugly sidewalk. I'm tearing it all up, and I'm driving and flipping everything right and doing all these things, and I'm just getting so excited. I'm just tearing, and I'm ripping things apart, and I'm just enjoying just tearing things, fighting into everything the earth can provide. And suddenly, I am Kali, the goddess of destruction and rebirth. And oh, do I have an outfit. I have a gown of 50 human heads. I have a girdle that is all human hands. I am in such a rage, in such a full-on strength and powerful woman mode that I am sticking out my tongue. Oh, you laugh. But if you saw me driving a Bobcat in your neighborhood, you would be scared. So here it is. He's coming, driving the Bobcat, tearing things up. Well, one of the downsides of being a goddess in her destroyer aspect, and surprisingly there are a couple, is that you're not as precise as maybe you should be. So when I was flipping the bucket and doing all this stuff, and I've been really, really careful, each time I was making sure that I dumped out the rubble before I flipped the bucket back up. So you go scoop, dry, dump, make the rubbles out, flip back up, drive back, scoop again. Kept doing that nicely. Kylie, crazy lady that she is, had the rubble, drove it over, dropped the bucket, did not wait for the rubble to complete, flipped, came crashing down on the cage. I found out why cages around bobcats surprised me so much, it knocked me straight into my middle-aged woman homeowner aspect. Oh. So then, I just had to drive and be really careful again and put the Bobcat away. And come Sunday afternoon, the kindly man showed up and I waved goodbye to the Bobcat. And I went back to my diary and I checked off driving a Bobcat off my bucket.